Hi, my name is Anaisa, and today I'll be discussing the impact of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation on job performance. Before I jump right in, here's what I'll be talking about today. First, I'll begin by discussing what is extrinsic and intrinsic motivation and how the book describes it. Second, I'll be discussing my case study, which is an issue I've experienced in my research lab. Then I'll be discussing a research study that investigated the different impacts of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation on job performance. Lastly, I'll be providing a possible solution for my case study based on the research study I found. To begin, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation are two kinds of ways an individual can be motivated. The difference between the two is that intrinsic motivation is when the individual is internally motivated to do a task. This can be for various reasons, such as it pertaining to something that the individual is interested in or passionate about. Meanwhile, extrinsic motivation is when the employee is motivated by external factors such as rewards or punishments. As a result, these factors motivate individuals to engage in specific behaviors. Now, according to our textbook, which discusses these kinds of motivation within the workplace, intrinsic motivation is when an employee is motivated by feelings of accomplishment or satisfaction after completing a task. An example of this can be providing an employee with a task that is challenging but not too challenging. It shouldn't be too challenging because if it is, it can discourage the employee instead of intrinsically motivating them. However, if it is slightly challenging, it can motivate the employee to want to complete the task for feelings of satisfaction or accomplishment. Then, in terms of extrinsic motivation, it is the idea that a behavior is controlled by its consequences. An example of this is when an employee takes on a workload that is more than they can manage in order to gain a raise. In this situation, the employee is engaging in a behavior for a reward rather than for their accomplishment or satisfaction. When discussing these two motivations, the book highlights that intrinsic theorists believe that workplaces should incorporate intrinsic approaches more than extrinsic. The reason for this is because it can not only cause employees to feel satisfied or accomplished with the task, but also with their jobs. In order to incorporate this into workplaces, theorists have proposed that providing employees with slightly challenging tasks and giving them autonomy over how they approach these tasks can increase employees' intrinsic motivation. Now, the case study that I'll be talking about today that is related to this topic has to do with an issue I've experienced while working in my research lab. Part of my role as a research assistant is to make social media posts for our lab. However, this wasn't as enforced until recently when they've established a new rule that has an extrinsic approach. The new rule is that we have to make 2 social media posts a quarter, and if we don't meet this requirement, we have to do 2 Instagram takeovers for every social media post that was completed. For example, if I only make 1 social media post, I have to do 2 Instagram takeovers. However, if the requirement is met, individuals who completed it will receive a goodie bag at the end of the quarter gathering. Since the enforcement of this new rule, I've noticed that my enjoyment of creating social media posts has decreased. The main reason for this is because I mostly worry about getting it done in time, especially because it can be a lengthy process in which we have to wait to receive feedback from our supervisors every time we think we're almost done. Another reason is that I have to rush and find topics to discuss, which aren't usually topics I'm passionate about, but rather simple topics I can get done easily to complete my task. Since taking this class, I've realized that this rule has an extrinsic approach because if we don't complete the social media posts, we have to do an Instagram takeover, which can be seen as a form of punishment. In this case, the reward is receiving a little gift like a small goodie bag at the end of the quarter gathering. The research study that I found investigated the different impacts intrinsic and extrinsic motivation has on job performance. In order to investigate this, the researchers conducted a cross-sectional study that had 3 different parts: questionnaires or surveys on different populations, such as managers of gas station chains, employees of these chains, as well as other managers and employees in different fields. Based on these surveys and questionnaires, they were measuring intrinsic and extrinsic motivation based on the variables of burnout, work-family conflict, job commitment, and turnover intention. At the end of the study, they found that intrinsic motivation was positively correlated with good work performance and effective commitment. This means that the employees who were intrinsically motivated performed well in their jobs and had an emotional attachment to their workplace. They also found that extrinsic motivation was positively correlated with burnout, turnover intention, work-family conflict, and continuance commitment. This means that employees who are motivated by rewards or punishments tend to experience burnout, quit or leave their job, commit to their job based on how much they have to lose, and have their jobs interfering with family life. As a result, this demonstrates that being intrinsically motivated is more beneficial for employees because it causes them to perform well and enjoy their jobs. Considering this, it may be beneficial for workplaces to adopt this approach. To incorporate this, the researchers advise that supervisors should allow employees to engage in autonomy by being less controlling and encouraging employees to engage in decision making and voice their concerns. Now that I've learned how intrinsic motivation can be increased based on the advice proposed by the textbook and research study, I would fix the issue for my case study by getting rid of the rule. Although the rule is effective in encouraging research assistants to complete social media posts, its performance has decreased due to research assistants doing it only to get it done, rather than actually putting in the effort. To improve research assistants' efforts and intrinsic motivation, I'd propose that supervisors meet with research assistants to discuss topics they're interested in and present any possible ideas that can be social media posts. This can be done at the beginning of the quarter during our RA meeting and can provide a good opportunity for supervisors to bond with research assistants, creating a stronger work culture. This also provides the opportunity for research assistants to voice their opinions on social media posts and any concerns they may have. Lastly, to keep the task slightly challenging, I would propose that one social media post is required each quarter but without any consequences. Instead, if a research assistant doesn't meet the requirements, I would encourage supervisors to check in with them. In the long run, this can create a stronger caring environment within our lab, strengthening relationships and creating the likelihood that research assistants are more intrinsically motivated. And that concludes my presentation.